Back in August, I made a video discussing the one-shot Blue Box. The intention was that video was supposed to be the first in a series discussing potential eventual serializations, but yeah, I haven't exactly made more yet. But that's not why we're here, because as luck would have it, Blue Box by Koji Miura has finally graced the pages of Shonen Jump, making its debut, and so, like I said in that original video, I want to follow up with the first chapter and discuss what changes, if any, were made, and speculate about what those changes could mean for the series going forward. I'll be discussing the first chapter in depth, so if you haven't read it yet, but want to, link for that is in the description. Let's do this. The first chapter begins with Taiki, our male lead being promptly hit in the face with a basketball by his crush, Chinatsu. The two have a short exchange before we get some basic narration about their school and a little of Taiki's personal backstory. In case you didn't pick up from the thumbnail or read the one-shot or watch my previous video, this is a very grounded romance sports series, so most of this narration is centered around establishing the relationships of our characters rather than any heavy world building, because why would you need that? All you need to know is that their middle and high schools are joined, which is why Taiki has this pre-existing history with his senpai Chinatsu before the series properly starts. His feelings are then more fleshed out through his interactions with two of his friends, Kyo and Hina, both of whom are far from encouraging when it comes to his chances with Chinatsu. But Taiki insists he'll never know if he doesn't try and seems undaunted. We then see our two leads interact again, with Taiki's inner monologue showing that despite his intentions, he is still nervous to actually initiate any potential for progress in their relationship. But this scene is still full of some great chemistry between the two, brought about when Taiki absolutely overreacts to seeing Chinatsu might be a little cold. This first chapter is full of these great little bits where he's simply a dork, but moments like this serve to show how earnest he can be when he's not busy out and overthinking himself. A cute interaction ensues as a result, and they part ways. We get a brief interlude showing the rest of Taiki's day, featuring more teasing from the gymnastics gremlin, before he again sees Chinatsu when she's practicing at the end of the day. They play a bit of one-on-one basketball before talking about their respective sports. It's a nice conversation that sets up, at least in my mind, a lot of potential themes that can be explored as the series goes on. The value of both team and individual sports, and how these mentalities are reflected in our two leads. Not to mention the idea of support, both during a game and off the court. Taiki then mentions the first time he saw Chinatsu practicing after a hard loss, and how that inspired him to work harder, and then also in his mind he adds the addendum that that was when he first began to like her. And I love this exchange. When he cuts through his own anxiety and speaks his mind, that's when Taiki gets closer to and actually begins to connect with Chinatsu. I anticipate this could be somewhat of a recurring motif, and I'm looking forward to Taiki gaining more and more confidence in the process. They once again part, and the next morning Taiki discusses Chinatsu with his mom, with her revealing that she and Chinatsu's mother played on the same basketball team in high school. That sets up the added reveal that her family is moving overseas, which stuns Taiki as he rushes off to school, unwilling to believe this could happen. My favorite part about his inner monologue as he runs is how it's focused on Chinatsu's wants and desires. His concern isn't centered around him no longer getting to see her, though there may be some subconscious motivation there as well, but primarily he's focused on Chinatsu's efforts going to waste, her not being able to see her basketball dreams through to the end. He bursts into the gym and gives this big impassioned speech, again cutting through his usual hesitancy, before Chinatsu reveals that while her family is leaving, she is staying in Japan with a family friend so she can continue to play basketball. A now very flustered Taiki goes to leave, but Chinatsu mentions that, while she had already decided to stay, it was their conversation the previous day that ultimately convinced her, leading to this beautiful two-page spread. The chapter then ends the next morning with Taiki being the most relatable of protagonists and cringing at everything he said the previous day before going downstairs and discovering Chinatsu's there. The family friend she's staying with is revealed to be her mom's old teammate and Taiki's mother, setting up a premise that has actually been happening a lot in recent shonen rom-coms, from a couple of kakus to Kanojo mo Kanojo, and even Jump's own Witch Watch. Though that last one is debatably not a rom-com, but the jury's still kinda out, anyway, the cohabitation is still a trope there. But that wraps up chapter 1, and if you remember the one-shot, then you know quite a bit was actually changed. The general plot structure of Taiki meeting Chinatsu, then talking with his friend, then meeting at the gym again, then introducing a conflict before they meet a final time, that's all there, but the details are somewhat different. The biggest one most people will probably note is the lack of a confession and subsequent kiss. I kinda predicted this in my original video, and while I would have cried out in so much joy if that had happened in Chapter 1, I understand why Miura isn't doing it that quickly. The confession and kiss clearly served to simply put a nice bow on what was at the time a standalone story. That said, putting Taiki in this sort of situation where he's constantly going to be around Chinatsu could serve as a catalyst for their relationship speeding up. But without knowing exactly what the chapter structures are going to entail, I'm not going to say how fast they could still get together. Volume 1 is still on the table in my book, but it could still take a bit longer. We'll just have to see. People also suspect this setup is going to be used for very tropey rom-com scenarios like walking in on each other while they're in the bath or changing. However, that is far from guaranteed, I would say. As I mentioned, one of Blue Box's contemporaries in Jump, Witchwatch, has this cohabitation hook, and yet the series has kind of gone out of its way to not explore this trope, even going so far as to kind of poke fun at the idea of it. I obviously expect some tropes to be present, but I don't see the series steering too hard into the ecchi side of things. The balance the first chapter struck between romance and comedy is near perfect, and I think trying to shoehorn in these stereotypical rom-com tropes just isn't going to play to the series' strengths as I currently see them. But hey, I'm up for being proven wrong. Another change that's worth noting is Taiki now plays badminton as opposed to volleyball in the one-shot. I suspect this was because of one of two reasons. One possibility is the sport Taiki played wasn't exactly that big of a deal in the one-shot. He was the romantic-focused lead compared to Chinatsu being the sports-focused one. Therefore, the change just wasn't that big of a decision. The other is that the editorial department simply saw volleyball and suggested that drawing any sort of comparison to Haikyuu might give readers unintended ideas about the series. I don't know. Regardless, I like the change. It gives Taiki a nice point of contrast with Chinatsu, him playing a solo sport while she's on a team. They already discussed why Taiki prefers this, and his very direct nature is a good fit for such a sport. And again, it's ripe to explore the theme of support that I suspect will still come up as it was such a central focus in the one-shot. It also means they can play each other in one-on-one games with both of their sports, like we see in this first chapter, while with volleyball that wouldn't really be possible in the same way. It's also worth noting that Kyo, Taiki's friend, is now a badminton player as well, whereas he was in the Shogi Club in the one-shot. Functionally so far, he's played the same role of stressing just how far out of Taiki's league Chinatsu is, although her basketball talents are given far more focus in this first chapter than they were previously. Adding to this despair is a character who was entirely absent from the one-shot, minus maybe this one panel at the end, the rhythmic gymnastics gremlin Hina-chono. My gut reaction, because anime and manga have ruined me, was, oh no, potential love triangle alert. But nothing in this first chapter suggests anything beyond platonic teasing friendship from either of them, which I am so on board for. I don't think we see enough friendships like this in rom-com series, and if this can get anywhere near the level of Ishigami and Kaguya, that would be phenomenal. Plus, this could open the door for Taiki maybe helping her with a future crush she may develop on someone else. There are a lot of other small changes I could talk about. Why Chinatsu knows Taiki's name, the lack of a potential romantic rival, the fact the one-shot takes place in spring whereas the first chapter seems set towards the end of winter, but instead I want to focus on something that's actually shared between the two. That being the time Taiki sees Chinatsu crying while practicing after her team's loss. The moment is present in both, but the composition and paneling is entirely different. The one-shot puts a lot of focus onto the shot. It takes up the most real estate, and then we zoom in to see her tears and Taiki noting that especially, with the bottom of the page featuring some narration from him that gives us context. And as much as I love this, personally I'm a big sucker for blank backgrounds in manga, I think the series proper handles it better. The setup is functionally the same, but the page of her shooting is reduced from 4 panels to 3, and all the dialogue is removed. The detail of the gym is on full display, we see more of her face, getting a better sense of her emotions in the moment, and most of all, the amount of shots she's taken is impossible not to notice. That's there in the one-shot as well, but if you're like me, you are more focused on the dialogue than the basketballs, which take up a small portion of an already small panel. In the first chapter, meanwhile, this page is superb, pure visual storytelling. Miura took one of the most impactful and one of my personal favorite pages from the one-shot and made it even better. So all in all, the first chapter of Blue Box was quite different from its one-shot that was stupidly well received by all accounts. Yet, none of the changes diminish my enthusiasm for the series going forward. That emotional core of Taiki and Chinatsu's relationship is still there, and still downright adorable, the sports theming is present, if not given more focus than the one-shot, and above all, the potential for something special is there. It's important to understand that changes are almost always going to be made between the prototype and final design, and I'm glad I didn't get too attached to the plot the one-shot presented for that reason. Plus, on an extra good note, it looks like these changes have overall been well received. Blue Box was even trending in Japan for a short time after the chapter's release, and the Reddit discussion thread is the most upvoted I've seen for a first chapter in I don't know how long. So at least for right now, the future of Blue Box looks pretty damn bright, and I could not be happier. But those are just my thoughts, and as always, I would love to hear what you have to say. Are you excited for this new serialization? What do you think of the changes that were made? Those thoughts and any others you may have can be left down below. Also, if you're watching this within the first few hours of when this video goes up, then I am live on Twitch, so feel free to come by and talk about this video or anything else. Thank you so much for watching though, and as always, an especially big thanks goes out to my awesome patrons, OverjoyedSoup, MVPino, Carjose, and everyone else whose support helps make videos like these possible. Links to that Patreon if you would like to join them, my shirts and everything else are either down below or on the screen right now. Thank you once again, and I will see you guys next time.